Welcome back to the BSC YouTube channel. As always, your host, Patrick Kerbler, joined by Tim and Jarrett. Once again, as always, they're always here too. Fellas, that was a game Penn State played. They beat Florida International 34-0, but to say that score didn't quite represent how Penn State played, what the game was like, would be a bit of an understatement. So, Tim, we'll start with you. Just general thoughts coming out of that game. We don't want to get specific, and we'll certainly talk about Drew's play, the running backs, et cetera. But kind of like what's your main takeaway coming out of that game?
Well, my hand is I'm not hitting the panic button just yet, but my hand is definitely wavering over it after that offensive performance, or I guess offensive performance, I should call it. Defense. Hey, you know what? You pitched a shutout. I mean, I don't necessarily care how dominant it might have looked to the naked eye. You hold a team to 0 points. That's impressive in my book, because shutouts in general are just hard to get in football. Special teams, mostly good. I think Gabe Nwosu might need to work on his kickoffs this week. But, man, we got ourselves a punter, don't we, fellas?
Yeah, definitely see how he won the starting job. I was a little surprised to hear that news last week, but yeah, I totally get it now.
No, certainly Nwosu has a giant leg, but right, I think that's kind of the fact that the last thought was our punting that looked good. Kind of speaks to what this game was like, where it was frustrating for Penn State for really the large majority of the afternoon. They got those 2 touchdowns late. One aided by Chaz Coleman's strip sack, and nearly scoring a touchdown himself. But right, this looked like it was going to be a 20-0 final score, which, yeah, great that the defense held them scoreless, but an uninspiring day from Penn State. Jarrett, just once again, your kind of main takeaway thoughts, big picture thoughts coming out of the day before we get into specific players and positions and stuff like that.
Yeah, start with defense. Played pretty well. I know, the Florida International found some holes in the defense here and there. Obviously, they were able to pitch a shutout, so can't complain too much. The pressure was there. I think the thing that Florida International did really well is Jenkins was just incredibly elusive and kind of knew how to escape pressure several times. I think with a lot of other quarterbacks, they would have brought him down the pocket pretty early, and those plays would not have been extended. And speaking of Jenkins, I had the thought before heading in this game that he'll be, earning a nice paycheck next season. And after seeing what he did, even though they didn't put out any points on the board, I think we'll be watching him playing on a team that spends some time in the rankings next year.
Yeah,
I definitely see a team looking out to him who's going to have a decent team and needs a bring sport experienced quarterback. As far as the offense, obviously pretty sleepy start. Drew was struggled a bit at times, seemed a little bit off in the first half, which was disappointing after how crisp he looked last week. So I don't know, just wasn't necessarily the most polished performance on offense, and just really glad we weren't playing Oregon today. I don't know. I guess we'll get more into individual players, but there were some good things about the offense, but there was a lot of concern. I think my biggest takeaway from this game is that offensive line obviously isn't quite what we were imagining heading the season, but the thing that really is kind of, like Tim said, not necessarily panicking, but definitely cause for some concern is the short yardage plays, where it just doesn't feel like, they did produce a bit more from the running game today, I thought, but it's concerning when you have a 3rd and 2 and you really need to pick up those 2 yards and they can't do it. And that happened on several instances today.
I think that's a good place for us to start as we go into more specifics, just because when you look at the box score, right, Nick Singleton runs for 144 yards and 16 carries. That's 9 yards a pop.
You mean Katron Allen?
Oh, did I say Singleton?
Yeah.
Katron Allen. Sorry. Thank you, Tim. Yes, Katron Allen. Nick Singleton, on the other hand, 76 yards on 13 carries. So 5.8 yards per carry. So you look at the box score and you would say those two guys, had good games, that the running game was all there. But yeah, like you said, Jarrett, so much of this game was in that 3rd and 4, 4th and 3, 2nd and 8. And it didn't seem like that the rushing attack was where it was last season against, Oregon and SMU and Boise State. And of course, so many people would make the joke last year that's like, oh, it's just SMU and Boise State, but this is just FIU. You'd think that they would be able to generate a little bit more consistency, despite what the stats show. So, as Franklin says, or he has said a lot this offseason about, Penn State makes us to the semifinal last year. Fans 99% of fans elsewhere would be happy about this, but here there's this higher expectation. I think that's a similar story when you look at the rushing attack of, Allen has 144 yards, Singleton has 76 yards, be yet we're here saying it should be better. Tim, where are you with Nick Singleton? Because I know for me, right, one of the big questions, one of the things he did always really, really well is, right, he's a home run hitter. If he's in the open field and he has an angle, he can destroy that angle in a second. One of the things he needed to work on was being able to make guys miss. And I think today kind of showed where his limitation was, where there's one thing to be Saquon Barkley in the open field, right, that spins the jukes and everything. There's another to just never even try to make guys miss. And it seems like Singleton doesn't even try to juke people. He doesn't try to. It's either he beats someone's speed or he is just running straight into them. Where are you on the K-Tron versus Singleton sphere right now? Do you lean one way or the other? Do you still like the 50-50 split? Because I know for me, I feel like I'm more on Team K-Tron.
I'm on Team K-Tron as well. I mean, you saw him basically steal Nick Singleton's thunder at the end with that 60-plus yard touchdown scamper. I mean, that's Singleton's signature move. But, man, I mean, I don't know what's up with Nick. I don't know if is he banged up again? Because, man, he looked several steps slower, like he was running in molasses at times. I mean, there was one play sticks out to me. He seemed to have what should have been a hole for, could just run up there for a first down on second or third and short. Instead, he tries to run horizontally and then ends up stuck between a blocker and a defender and just ends up going for just a couple yards. But he looked so slow in the process too. I don't know. Again, I don't know if there's something underlying with him, but he seems like he's lost a few steps and doesn't have that explosiveness that he's had the last few years.
I don't know if I agree that he looks slower, lack of explosiveness, because I know the play you're talking about, and I feel like it's he has indecision sometimes when he's in the open field where he wants to usually bounce it if he can, but as soon as he realizes that he can't bounce it, he has no backup move. So he ends up just basically running into either a defender, or secondly, and I believe on the play you're talking about, he just ran into the back of Trevor Pena, who was blocking in front of him. And it's you need to go one or the other. It can't just be in a case like that where you have open field on both sides. You can't just follow the blocker and just run into the blocker's back and make it an easy tackle.
And K-Tron's just more decisive, I feel. Yeah. If there isn't an opening in one spot, he'll quickly try to reverse course and find that opening elsewhere, or put on a spin move, or just try to truck somebody. I don't really see Singleton trying to do any of those things.
He can make guys miss, or at the very least not go down with arm tackles. And again, this is being very granular with Nick Singleton. I still think he's a really good running back, but it just felt like today especially, I don't think he broke a tackle. Whereas K-Tron at least can, evade defensive tackles as they're falling to the ground. He can step over them and stuff like that. And just seemed like Singleton could not, which he's a big part of, Penn State's big play ability. And when he doesn't have it, it does seem like the offense kind of falters a bit. Let's switch over to Drew Aller. Jarrett, thoughts on Drew Aller today? Very much an up and down game. What were we thinking as far as how he played?
Yeah, it was an inconsistent effort. There was good and there was bad. The announcers kept mentioning that there was no rain, it wasn't wet, but it certainly looked like the offenses were just kind of playing, with the wet ball today, especially in the first half. The thing I was most disappointed in is it seemed like last week his mechanics just showed a huge improvement over from last year. And then today we kind of saw what held him back previously, where, sometimes it's just feet wouldn't be right. He'd throw the ball just a little bit behind the receiver. That happened, I want to say 4 or 5 times in the first half, where, they could have made the completion. The ball was just behind where it needed to be. I think a couple of times receivers were snagging, and it also led to a few incompletions where it probably should have been. And credit Florida International too. They provided good coverage. There was a few plays where Drew really tried to put in a tight window, but there just really wasn't space there, and he just wasn't able to quite deliver it. When he did have time, he made a few really nice reads where he scanned the field, found the open man. So, there's some really good things that we saw to build off of, but there's some things that need to be cleaned up. And again, I think it's just kind of a matter with, and I don't know if it was dealing with the wet ball or what, but just seemed like his mechanics, his touch were just a little bit off, especially in the first half.
It's going to be one of those games I have to go back and watch. It was certainly frustrating at the time. I do feel like some of those inaccuracies came back today, but even on some of the drops, like I know with Khalil Dinkins, like there was one, that was like 15 yards over the middle that it was a bit behind him, and it needs to be in front of him, and you hope that you put it on the body a little bit more. But Dinkins gets two hands on it. That's a play that he has to make, and this was like one of the things like we were talking about the Miami Notre Dame game, right? Like Carson Beck is looked at as having a good game because his wide receivers made big plays, right? They made big catches, and there were still really good. I mean, Devontae Ross, Jarrett, your guy, right, making that grabbing the end zone, like, and it's just plays like that do separate like a good game from a great game, or a good game from a bad game, whatever it might be. And I think the most frustrating thing for me with Aller is just whether I shouldn't say with Aller, I guess with the offense in general, whether it's Aller, whether it's Kolonicki, the play calls, how they're being executed, whatever it might be, just too much dinking and dunking. Like, and it brings back bad memories of 2023 where, right, Penn State plays this pretty soft schedule to open the season before they finally have Ohio State in like mid-October, and against Northwestern and Illinois and all these other teams, even Iowa is like, oh, can't generate big plays. But don't worry, we're efficient. We're able to get on third down, dink and dunk our way down the field, ball control, et cetera, et cetera. And then that's just not going to work against the elite of the elite. So that kind of stuck out a little bit today. They do get that touchdown to Devontae Ross. K-Tron ends up getting that run at the end as well, which kind of skew things. But it's frustrating to be at a point against FIU where they were just comfortable, 3 or 4 yards, the out routes to Luke Reynolds and things like that. How worried are we about this offense as far as the big plays and things like that?
I'll say I don't necessarily mind the dinking dunking because, it's an efficient way to run an offense. It keeps the opposing offense on the sideline. You do that against a good opponent, you're putting yourself in a good position to win. If you can go the length of the field that way. My concern though is, are you doing it out of necessity, or are you doing it because that's the offense you want to run? And the thing that does concern me, if you're not establishing a deep passing game whatsoever, we saw a little bit of that today, but not a whole lot. But if that's the case, you're going to go back to 2023 where you didn't really have to worry about the deep ball, and even parts of last season really. And just makes it so much easier for the defenses to defend our offense because they're covering less field. And we kind of go back to the 2023 conversation of well, you don't have to. Basically, 2023 Penn State's big play threat was Singleton breaking one, and what defenses did to counter that is just line of safety over him and take away the threat of a big run coming out from him. Yeah, so it's just a matter of they need to prove that they can do that more consistently. Otherwise, they're going to have some problems against better defenses for sure.
So, Tim, are we pressing the panic button or no? I know earlier you mentioned the panic button. I think you said you're not going to press it, but can you confirm not pressing the panic button offensively yet?
Not yet. I mean, it's game 2. And I talked about this before we went on the air. And last year, Oregon, in one of their opening game last year, they beat FCS Idaho 24-14. It was a game where Idaho only led 17-14 in the fourth quarter. And this is after they were up 14-0 at halftime and looked like they'll just cruise, but offense stalled and just wasn't able to put up points. Idaho came up with a couple of big plays for touchdowns and made it a ball game. And I imagine Duck fans were hitting the panic button or were pretty close to it, just like how some of us are feeling. Well, a lot of us are feeling after today, but that Oregon team went on to finish the regular season undefeated, beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship game, beat Ohio State in Autzen Stadium. And I know they got waxed by Ohio State in the rematch in the playoffs, but still they went on to, finish regular season number 1. So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Penn State necessarily, but I guess it's the reason why I'm not, I say it's hovering, but I'm not hitting the panic button just yet on the offense.
That's a difficult thing of just fandom in general, but certainly in our position where we watch these games and we spend so much time, thinking about the team and writing about the team, researching the team, and we watch these games and we come on here right after and it's like, all right, now give us your takes. I think there's the happy medium of, like you said, Tim, like no team goes through a year where it's every single game is just like an A+ game. Like Penn State comes out and wins, 56-0. Do we know what the spread was for this game? Was it 41?
I think it was like 41.
Last I saw was yeah, I think it opened at 41. The last I saw was like 43.5.
Okay,
so it did move a little bit more towards Penn State's favor.
Yeah. But right at the end of the day, like as much as we're saying, the Katron Allen run at the end, and then the Chaz Coleman strip sack and almost getting a touchdown, then Nick Singleton getting it in from there kind of skews things. It's like those are still plays that happened, and those are important plays. It's not like, if you make plays in the last 4 minutes of a game, they shouldn't count. But you look forward so much to Penn State games, Penn State Saturdays, and then to watch that first half is just it's frustrating. It's frustrating because like I think the difference, at least compared to like some of the other years where it feels like Penn State always has these questions about offensively, can they generate big plays? Like going back to 2021 with Clifford. I think the difference with this team is I feel like that they shouldn't have those questions. Like it feels like it should be better. And even what we saw last week from Kyron Hudson and Tre'Bar Pena, not to say that they had bad days themselves. I'm actually going to pull out the box score here. Kyron Hudson, 5 catches for 37 yards. Pena only 2 for 32, with one of them being a 30-yard gain. But just felt like that I don't want to say they weren't trying, but just that there was a lack of focus there, which for this team that we want excellence for, and they just didn't have that today. But
the one thing I will say, not to make too many excuses for the team, but I think we're seeing on both sides of the ball a deeper rotation than what we're going to see definitely against Oregon and just in Big Ten play in general. I think they're working in a lot of guys. And I also kind of wonder some of the play calling, whether it's not so much as how you would call a game when you feel like you're on more equal footing, where you're saying, okay, this is what the best thing to do in this position to get in the end zone eventually. Yeah. But I feel like it's more like, this is what we want to work on. This is what we want to establish. This is what we want to, the kinks we want to work out. And it's kind of stubbornly, maybe not the correct word, but, it's just like in other situations, they may just be approaching it differently. I do kind of feel like it's more of a preseason feel, just the way the schedule shook out with these 3 very, winnable non-conference games in a bye week, that they're kind of approaching it a little bit differently than they would and than what we'll see in other weeks. But I do think the deep rotations of both sides of the ball, just trying to help guys gain more experience. I think we've seen a lot more players these past 2 weeks, especially in the first half, than we'll see, down the road here.
And there's something to not putting certain things on film against Oregon, right? You're going to keep things pretty vanilla, pretty basic. But you hope that even in those circumstances, that even if Penn State keeps it, vanilla and basic, that they should be able to still score. It's almost like sometimes when I play a video game, like sometimes I'm super focused and locked in and like, okay, I'm really actually trying here. There's other times where it's like, I'm listening to a podcast or whatever it might be, and maybe not as focused, but it's like, I still shouldn't be throwing 2 or 3 interceptions in those games. I should still, be able to win pretty comfortably. So it's almost similar to that. Not to compare myself and Andy Kolomnicki, but I don't know. Just it is funny how much we put into these games when it's like, I don't know. I think back to like 2018 when if you remember, like Penn State's offense got off to just this crazy start, like explosive plays. I think they were averaging like 47 points per game going into that Ohio State game, and it didn't matter. They still strolled at times against Ohio State. So. Not to say none of this matters, but there's just so much that goes into it. There's so many different things. But let's talk defense. Before we talk defense, though, you see at the bottom, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you are listening or watching right now, it means that you're on YouTube. It means that you can subscribe. I saw something like 92% of the people that listen to us are not subscribed. That is unacceptable. As unacceptable as Penn State's offensive performance and play calling and execution today, that is unacceptable. So if you are listening to this, you're watching this, make sure that you are subscribed. If not, you see Tim Aiden over there, he will come and get you. So do not make me send Tim Aiden after you because he will get you. So make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're liking the video, and make sure that you are checking our stuff out at blackshoediaries.com as well. Tim, thoughts on the defense? A shutout, but certainly I wouldn't say they had an A+ game, but maybe you do.
Well, I consider giving an A+ to the defensive line, at least for my position grades that are going to be coming out tomorrow, per usual. But yeah, other units, linebacker, we'll see. I mean, maybe not quite an A-level performance. Wasn't bad either. I mean, they made some tackles in the open field, which if they hadn't, they could have gone for some pretty huge gains for FIU because there was nobody else there to make the stuff. So got to give them some credit. Secondary, I thought overall was fine. I mean, maybe not quite A, but maybe B+, A-. I did like Zakee Wheatley. He had a very clutch deflection of what probably should have been a touchdown for FIU. If you remember,
incredible play.
Yeah, I mean, I thought actually that was going to be a touchdown because I didn't think Wheatley was going to close quickly enough to get a hand in there. And, he showed some great closing speed, got his hand in there just in time to get a piece of it and, ruin what should have been 6 points for FIU. And that ultimately preserved the shutout. So, I'm secondary going to look, it's going to be good grades all around for the defense. And again, they held them to 0 points. I mean, there's not much more you can ask them to do besides that, even if optically it may not have looked dominant at all times. 0 points is 0 points to me.
Sorry, just pulling up the box score here just because they do have defensive stats out now. I think probably the biggest takeaway from the day would have to be Chaz Campbell. Would we have any arguments on that? At least defensively. Chaz Coleman, sorry.
Yeah, the Chazmanian Devil, the true freshman who's quickly making himself into a household name for Penn State fans. Nice. But I do feel bad he didn't quite complete the scoop and score, but it's still a great moment for him to get a sack, fumble recovery, and that kid's going to be so much fun to watch these next few years. It makes me feel good about the D line going forward once Denai Dennis Sutton is gone after this year. So I think, I don't think he came in. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was a summer enrollee.
He did not enroll.
Yeah, so he hasn't been through an off season yet with the strength and conditioning program, and you see what he's already doing. Like, you wait until he's got a full off season with Chuck Losey working with him, and man, he's going to be a beast. Maybe every bit of a beast as DDS is right now.
What's crazy is that they only have him. So they have him down for the sack. They only have him as for 1 tackle for loss and 1 tackle, which means that the sack was the only tackle and tackle for loss that he had, which I am almost sure that's not right. I'm pretty sure he had an additional tackle for loss, but either way, if he had a sack and 2 tackles for loss, his game, and I kind of talked about this last week with Denai Dennis Sutton, who had a fantastic game, right? He had a sack and 1.5 tackles for loss and 2 forced fumbles, but his impact was felt even beyond that, just as someone who was dangerous. I thought Chaz Coleman was very similar today. Just it felt like he was winning so much of his pass rushes and generating pressure, even if he wasn't getting home. Same with Zariah Fisher. I was very happy with how Zariah Fisher looked just coming off of the season-ending injury last year. I thought that, once again, a guy who he didn't get home and didn't get any sacks or anything, but I thought athletically he looked pretty good. Jarrett, other thoughts defensively as far as who stood out, who didn't stand out, who struggled? Just where do you want to go defensively?
Yeah, just kind of reiterating what I mentioned earlier about Jenkins. His escapability really kind of gave FIU a bit of a chance in offense and just extended some plays. But I think with other quarterbacks, they would have had a lot more sacks, a lot more negative
Yeah.
plays. It would have looked like a more dominant shutout. I will say on the defensive side of the ball, one person who really is impressing me is Amari Campbell. I thought his transfer was kind of overshadowed by the receivers, and I can't remember if he committed the same day as Pena, right around there,
Right
but
around it,
he was Pena was obviously the headline just because of how much we desperately needed that productivity receiver. But yeah, Campbell's just been all over the field. He's just going to clean up a lot of stuff this year. The way he just gets the ball so quickly. Just really impressed with him. I think we're going to see, if we do stick with the 4-2-5, I think we'll see a ton of him and Rojas next to each other back there. Tim mentioned Wheatley already. I thought he was a standout in the secondary. Just was very active. And overall, I thought the defensive line played really well. They just really provided pressure throughout the game. Some of these younger guys, I know I saw Blanding in there quite a bit. It was great seeing Lonzo Ford get a interception back-to-back weeks with the defensive tackle, getting an interception. So, and White came up pretty big with the sack towards the end. So I think, we were pretty concerned about the depth and the experience of the defensive line. But I think, I think in a couple weeks, we're going to kind of forget we even had that conversation heading the season. So I feel really good about some of these younger guys. Even Jalen Harvey, too. We've mentioned him. But I thought he had a pretty good, first start last week. But, he was active. He was around the ball. He had I think it was him who had a really nice sack where him and Dennis Sutton kind of did the cross, and he kind of came around and got to Jenkins right away. So overall, just really impressed with the depth along the defensive line for sure.
It did feel like they gave up a little bit too much yardage in the run game. I do know FIU's running back, Keyshawn Owens, had 78 yards on 15 carries. Now, I want to say at least like 20 or 30 of those came on FIU's, I want to say their second to last series, where I think Penn State was pretty fine. Like, hey, if you want to run the ball for 4 yards a pop or 5 yards a pop and just drain the clock when you're down, 20-0, by all means. But would like to see just a little bit stauncher of a defensive front. But again, that's pretty nitpicky when the defense had a shutout. Do want to say, and you mentioned it, Jared, I just thought one of my concerns from last week was defensive ends, and just Chaz Coleman looked athletic and looked like he had some potential, and same with Jalen Harvey, but just a little bit concerned that maybe it'd be too much too soon for these guys. But if Fisher can stay healthy, we saw what Chaz Coleman can be. I thought Jalen Harvey looked and played a lot more under control today. So yeah, I think through 2 games, if we're like looking like, do you feel better? Do you feel worse about positions? I think defensive end and even defensive tackle too, with Xavier Gilliam type landing, is somewhere where you feel better about. So Tim, I thought you had something to say there.
No. I'm watching the SMU Baylor in overtime.
Great, Gabe Newusu. So we'll wrap it up with special teams. Looked good punting the ball, had a 72-yarder. Did have 2 kicks out of bounds though, which I would love to fully understand what their game plan is on these kickoffs. Last week it seemed like they wanted to pin them in a corner. This week it was sometimes they were going long, other times they were trying to pin them in a corner. Can we just kick it through the end zone? Like, I would just start at the 25-yard line, like instead of like starting at the 17. Like, I'm sure there's some analytics out there that say like, a team's chance of scoring drive decreases by 13% if they're 8 yards back or whatever it might be. But I'm perfectly fine just kicking it through the end zone. Like, why are we trying to play this game?
Yeah, I kind of felt like that was kind of going back to the whole, kind of treating some of this like preseason to kind of experiment a little bit and work out some things, because Gabe obviously has the leg to kick out of the end zone every time. So
just straight.
Do that. Yeah, just do that. Don't risk putting out of bounds with a 35. So I'm curious if we'll see that strategy against a team like Oregon with all kinds of explosive athletes. I think you're right, Patrick. I think we'll be that'll be the plan, just to get the ball out of the end zone. So hopefully we'll see more of that coming through, because if it was an experiment, it didn't really work out too well. But I do give him credit for definitely know why he won the punting job. I think it was his first punt of the day that just went well over his head. And I think what ended up being a 72, 73-yard punt, I think.
Yeah. Second.
Then the other one.
He did have the one right before halftime or a little.
Yeah, the first one was down right inside the 2. Yeah. So I'm guessing, we always knew he had a powerful leg. He probably worked on his control a little bit over the offseason, was able to nail that down a little bit. But very promising showing for his first start as punter for sure.
So brain farts on offense, brain farts on defense, although, again, in a shutout, you can't really make too many complaints. Brain farts, as we just talked about, on special teams. Curious to see how many voters actually watched this game. I'm guessing not a ton, just considering that the noon slate also had Illinois and Duke. They had this SMU Baylor game that's going on. They had Iowa State.
Oh, man. They just so they were scored first in overtime, touchdown. Then SMU just threw first play from scrimmage, 25 yards to the end zone. Dude dove for it. So
there we go.
Pending the extra point.
I don't know what it is, but it's
second OT.
Yeah, I suppose if a game is on the CW, no matter who's playing, it's just basically almost guaranteed to be some type of bonkers finish. So
anyway, so Penn State had these brain farts everywhere. How many of the voters were actually watching this game? Who knows? They would probably just look at the box score and see, oh, Penn State won 34-0. Not a dominant effort, but clearly good enough. They had, 4 more first place votes than LSU. They had 7 to LSU's 3. So they were at 15-58 points. LSU was at 15-14 points. Depending upon what LSU does today, and I will be honest, I have no idea who LSU plays. I think it's Louisiana Tech. Yes, they play Louisiana Tech tonight at 7:30. Let's say LSU beats Louisiana Tech 42-10. Do we think that LSU jumps Penn State? Do we see Penn State drop from that number 2 spot?
I just think it's going to depend on, like Jared said, on how many of the voters actually watch the Penn State game live, not just whatever the highlights package is going to show, because the highlights package is going to show all the explosive plays for Penn State, and they're just going to see 34-0 as a final score, and they're going to think, oh, okay, Penn State. They didn't cover the spread, but they dominated. That's what they're. I don't see a need to penalize them for that.
I think it's easy to look at this too if you're a voter and you weren't watching to say, okay, they shut them out. They probably had a very vanilla offense. We're not going to punish them for that. The one thing I will say though about the rankings is there are several teams now that have a very impressive win on the resume already, which Penn State does not have and won't have the opportunity to have for another few weeks here. So I could see them using that logic where they're saying, okay, LSU looks good. They went out and beat Clemson. Miami looks good. They went out and beat Notre Dame. Even you can make that argument. Not that I'm expecting Florida State to jump Penn State, but you can make that argument as well with them. So I wouldn't be shocked either way if they stay firmly at number 2. But, if we find out tomorrow they decide to move LSU, maybe one other team ahead of them, I wouldn't be shocked, but it's not the end of the world. Penn State's got a couple opportunities coming up here soon to prove themselves. So if they do move back, they got excellent opportunities to move right back up.
I don't see them dropping lower than 3rd. They might drop 1 spot perhaps. If LSU wins in a super dominating fit, I'm talking 66-0 type game or something, then maybe they jump Penn State. But like we said, a lot of the voters, they may not be watching. I don't blame them. If you weren't a Penn State or an FIU fan, were you really watching today's game from start to finish? No, You weren't. Maybe at best if you're like me and you have YouTube TV, maybe you had it in your quad box or something, in one of the corners, but which you check from time to time. But otherwise, it's just people like us who are watching the whole thing.
Yeah, my guess is that my gut is that they don't drop just because I think most people did not watch the game and maybe they saw it was 10-0 at some point in the second quarter and thought, oh, Penn State doesn't look that good today, and then they are going to check the box score later and see that it was 34-0 and be okay with it. So not that it matters, like you said, Jarrett. They will have their opportunity in a couple of weeks when they play Oregon. Whether Penn State is ranked 2, 3, 4, 5 when they play Oregon, it really doesn't matter. They're going to have to win that game. So we'll see.
It's also not the first. Not to interrupt, Pat. It's also not the first time they've had a less than stellar performance in game 2 against a team that on paper they were supposed to handle pretty easily. Our colleague Colin Murphy pointing out in the Slack channel, this is our 2019 Buffalo / 2022 Central Michigan / 2024 Bowling Green game.
Yes, I do want to say last year, I was just looking this up, when they lost, they were ranked number 8 when they played Bowling Green, and they dropped to number 10. Now, that was a bit of a different game, being the fact that Penn State was literally trailing at halftime, at one point down 17-7, and even in the fourth quarter, I think, right, with like 6 minutes left, they were only up by 3. So certainly not an apples-to-apples comparison there, but Penn State did drop 2 spots. But my guess is that most people didn't watch. So I think Penn State stays at 2, but we'll see. Any final thoughts? Do we give Devontae Ross enough flowers, and Jarrett specifically for you because that's your guy? I thought punt return looked really good on punt return. Made a couple nice grabs. Obviously, the touchdown was great. It's annoying when they take so many few deep shots, and then you see Drew throw a 55-yarder like that, like on a laser, like. Last year, that was a ball that he lost, and there's too much air under it, and it allows the DB to be able to make more of a play on the ball. This one, he actually steps into on a laser, like right where it needs to be. And hey, it turns out when you have good wide receivers, like you actually give them a chance, they can make plays. So I just want to make sure we give Devontae Ross his flowers, and Jarrett, for you in particular, if you want.
Before I comment Ross, though, I will give. I just want to give a shout out to Darius Dixon, who apparently was going to have to keep changing his jersey every single time Penn State returns a punt, since they are both number 5 and both on the punt return unit. That's not fun getting that jersey over the pads several times a game.
I have an idea. Here's an idea. Darius Dixon, just get a new number.
Yeah, that was my thought. I was like, they're going to do a mid-season, an in-season number change here because this is going to get a little ridiculous. But no, I mentioned that a few times. I really want to see Ross rather, Devontae Ross get more involved in the passing game since last week he's coming off an injury. Only had the 1 target on the day, so glad to see him getting a little established early. Surprised he only had 3 receptions. I thought he had a few more than that, but did have a good to see him get involved in the offense. And for the life of me, I have no idea how he caught that pass, the touchdown pass, because the Florida International defender just basically kind of gave up on that and decided, okay, I'm just gonna grab him and prevent the touchdown, and he still managed to somehow falling backwards and pull the ball in with one hand miraculously. So pretty incredible catch, but good to see him being more involved and definitely looking very healthy. So just happy to see that all 3 of these transfer receivers who we had high hopes for all seem to like have some chemistry with Aller and seem definitely capable. We've had some of these guys in the past, Julian Fleming a year ago, Dante Cephas 2-3 years ago, who we had a lot of hype coming the season, and they just never really developed to be part of the offense. But I think all 3 of them will play a large role and will definitely add a lot of value to the offense this season.
And let me also say about the transfer wide receivers on Katron Allen's touchdown run, Trevor Pena ahead of him blocking, Kyron Hudson sprinted ahead to get the final block to allow Katron to get in the end zone. So, there's a lot of talk. I'm not going to mention names about other wide receivers on the team. They need to play because they're the best blocking receiver in college football. Once again, not going to name names. Maybe they don't need to play because Kyron Hudson, Trevor Pena, and these guys, they can all block as well. So just going to.
One other note in the passing game, Aller definitely likes to go to Luke Reynolds. I mean, he looked to him. He led the team in receptions, I think 7, maybe 8 catches total today. But he looked to him pretty often. And I think a lot of times when, he was a second, third read and he didn't see anything open right away, he knew to look to 85 and get him the ball. And I don't know what Reynolds' longest catch on the day was. But 14, yeah. So
7 catches, 58 yards. So
yeah, didn't have any real explosive plays, but obviously a dependable guy, and he's going to be playing a larger role in the offense this year, and someone who I'm sure is going to come up big on come up big on third downs this season for sure.
Yes, 1 week after I said, I think Andrew Rappelier might be tight end 1.
I've been ringing the Luke Reynolds bell since last week, so I'm just ringing it even harder now after today.
No, Reynolds looks good, and he's a guy, like, it is funny how you rate going in, like, this whole offseason, it was like, Dinkins, Reynolds, like, I even think like Reynolds, like his just ability with the ball once he has the ball to keep plays alive and make guys miss just has a little bit more pop to his game than Dinkins does. Dinkins continues he only catches touchdowns. That guy only catches touchdowns. Six touchdown now in I think 25 receptions. So yeah.
And Dinkins did have a couple of drops today, so hopefully it was just kind of a, just not his day, hopefully, because I mean he's proven pretty dependable for the most part.
Yes, we will see. But yeah, thank you for mentioning Luke Reynolds because he did have a nice game today. So final thoughts. Any other final thoughts, Jared, Tim, before we get out of here?
Offensive line's got some work to do. They need to figure out what's going on with the short yardage running attack where they're just having trouble converting. So, it's kind of one of those things that's hard to really judge watching a game live, but just kind of curious to see what the issues are there and how they're going to go about fixing it, and just hope for a better outcome next week in that scenario to kind of show that they're whatever the issue is, they're addressing it and they're going to be able to fix it, because you would think with this offensive line, that shouldn't be an issue, but so far it has definitely been more concerning and much more of a just not quite where we expected them to be for sure. And sorry, one other thing with the offensive line that we failed to mention is Drew Shelton had that beautiful 2-point conversion. Unfortunately, he got called back, but on a pretty uneventful. I think this is going to be a game that we're probably going to largely forget, by season's end. But that was that was maybe the most enjoyable moment of the game before, unfortunately, got called back.
It might not have counted on the box score or in reality, but it counts in my heart, which
exactly, yes. Usually the words out of my mouth that count in our hearts for sure.
Yeah, I'll just say,
and I hope Drew did keep the ball too. They showed him on the sideline hanging on to it, so let him have that momentum.
Yeah, I'm just glad I'm glad I don't have to pick the winner of the Penn State Oregon game for another couple weeks, because if I had to right now, I'd be leaning strongly towards reneging on my preseason pick of Penn State beating the Ducks. Not with that offensive performance today. They're going to need to, it's a lot they need to clean up. Even if they did kind of sort of make up for it late with a, couple explosive plays. But, a lot of, like Jared said, a lot of work to do, especially in the offensive line. So, next week against Villanova, it presents one last opportunity to clean some things up before the bye week. And then, it's on to the Big Ten slate with Oregon.
Yeah. Perhaps today will be a blessing in disguise as far as things just being crisper next week, because I certainly would I very much want next week to be like the 52-3 type game where it's just like Penn State comes out, they're up 28-0 going to halftime, like that type of thing. Like, let's just go into Oregon really feeling well, or going into the bye week feeling really well. But yeah.
And if I could provide a little bit of a silver lining, it's not a bad position to be. I know they didn't play to their potential today and what we were hoping to see. But when you're able to win a football game by a wide margin and still have things that, are obvious that need to work on, it just keeps everyone focused and, gives the coaches plenty of ammo, I guess, to make sure the team is focused and continues to improve. So,
hey, Jarrett, 99% of other programs would be pumped to be in this position. Not us. Not us. That is where we are. James really just living his wisdom this offseason, because 99% of programs would love to be here, but not us. So, yeah. We will see what happens next week. We'll be back on Wednesday. I was going to say Tuesday. We'll be back on Wednesday. We'll be around 7 o'clock again to talk about Villanova, do that preview. And man, I think overreactions from week 2 might be even more exciting than overreactions from week 1, because today gave us a lot of goodies to play with. So we'll be back on Tuesday at 7 p.m. to react more to this game, to look ahead to Villanova as well. As always, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Subscribe to the channel right now. Make sure you're liking the video too, and check out blackshoediaries.com. And just as a heads up, I did make a Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I got I was going to say playlist, but I got the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you want to watch live or watch on YouTube, you will still be here, but I am going to put an audio version on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. So if you're driving and stuff like that, and you just prefer to listen that way, we will be, I think our previous episode is actually up. So I'll upload this one for tomorrow morning. So, and everything else moving forward. So little surprise for everyone as well. All right. We'll see you guys Wednesday.